Hey guys, welcome back. This is part 2 of the video where we are going to scrape Instagram using Go programming language using multiple proxy servers. So within part 1, we were able to extract the Instagram data and save it into the users data table. And also we have a different table called users queue. Within this, we are saving all the users that will be processing next. So in this video, we are going to add multiple proxy servers and then request the Instagram data using all these proxy servers. The step one would be to create a new file in which we'll be saving the list of the proxy servers. So I'm going to call this as proxy.txt. This file is going to contain list of all the proxy servers. And in order to get a proxy server, we can use this particular website, or actually you can use any website that is providing you the list of proxy servers. I like this because you can directly copy and paste it. So Go programming language by default supports HTTP and SOX 5 proxy servers. So for that reason we cannot use SOX 4, we'll only be using HTTP and SOX 5. So these are the list of all the proxy servers that are available through this website. Let's save all of them into this file. Now let's add the protocol to this particular IP address. So this is our text file containing list of all the proxy servers. Now let's write a function that can actually read this file and then load the proxy servers into a variable. So let's create a global variable, call it as proxy servers. And now let's write a function that can load the proxy servers into that variable. So this is going to read the proxy.txt file, and f is the file handler. This is having the data. Now let's split this string at the new line so that we can get list of proxy servers. So here we have a function that is going to read the text file and then return us the list of proxy servers. So let's call this function in our main loop. Alright, the next step is to update our request function. So currently our make request function is only accepting a URL as a string. So we also have to add the proxy server. Okay, so we have updated our client. We have added this transport method. So this is going to use the proxy server that we have provided in order to make the get request for this URL. So let's also add a timeout in case if the proxy server is taking too long to respond. Let's terminate that correction. So I'm adding it 10 seconds. So if the proxy server does not respond within 10 seconds, we are going to terminate the connection and move on to the next one. And I'm also going to update the time.sleep method to 1 second. So we are only going to wait 1 second before making a new request. Alright, so we'll make a new function, proxy request. It is going to make a get request and return the data. And we are going to call this function using Go routines concurrently. So let's write that function. So this function is going to accept two channels. One is channel in, through which we are going to provide the username. The second one is channel out, through which we are going to get the user data. And we also have to pass on the list of servers that this is going to work on. If we take a look at our proxy.txt file, we have almost 600 different proxy servers. So what we are going to do is, we are going to allocate first 100 proxy servers to our first Go routine. We are going to allocate the next 100 to our next Go routine, and so on. So we are going to divide this list into n different sections, and then we are going to tell each of the concurrent functions to process that list of n proxy servers. So in order to do that, we also have to pass on the list of proxy servers the proxy function is going to work on. Now, within this proxy function, we need to iterate through all these proxy servers. So let's write a function for that. And we want to iterate it indefinitely. So once we have reached the last proxy server, we want to start again from the first proxy server. And now here we are going to update our get user data function so that this also accepts a proxy server. And now we can call our get user data function. So before we can pass on the username, we have to get the username from our channel. Now we are going to iterate through multiple proxy servers in order to fetch the data. Alright, so we'll make another change to user data. So in case if there is any error while doing json.unmarshal, which means that we are not getting the correct data from the Instagram, so which means that we are likely blocked. So let's also get the error back. Now what we can say is that if error is equals to nil, it means that there is no error and we got the data. So we can send this user data back to our main function. So let's do that. To send the user data, we have a channel called as the user data, and let me change the name of this variable. So we are going to pass in the user data. So here we only want to move on to the next proxy server if our current proxy server is not working. So I is representing the proxy server that we are working on, and if we are getting data without any errors, there is no reason to move on to the next proxy server. So that is the reason why we are having an else condition. Only if there is an error, we are moving on to the next proxy server. And once we have got the data, there is no reason to continue. Let's break out of this, and then let's wait for the next username as the input. Now let's update our getInsta function. So within the getInsta function, we need to call this proxy get n number of times. So for that, let's make a global variable which is representing how many number of instances or parallelly do we want to execute the function for. So in this example, I'm going to give the number as 10. So we'll have 10 functions concurrently running and getting the information from 10 different proxy servers at a time. Let's come back here. Within the getInsta function, the first thing what we need to do is we need to call the proxy get function for 10 times. So here you can see that we are requesting username from the next user queue. We are passing on that data to the proxy server. But there is an issue over here. The username is always going to get the first user from our database. So all the 10 number of times we are only going to get the first user from the user queue. So what we need to do is we need to create another database table which is going to contain the users that we are already processing. So let's do that. Alright, so we have created another table called as users temp. So this is only having one column within it, which is the username. So we are going to store the username within this particular table whenever we are getting a user from the user queue. So let's update the query of get next user. Alright, so we have updated our next user queue function. So this function is going to get the first username from our user queue table, and it is also going to insert the same user into the temporary table. So this particular user temp table, let me update that. So this user temp table is going to have list of users that we are currently processing. So when we are processing 10 users, we'll have a temporary table so that we'll get to know we are already processing them. So let's also update this guy. Okay, so now we have updated our next user function. This function is going to get the first username from the user queue table as long as the user is not in the user's temp table. So in this way, whenever we are doing next request, we are going to get the first user who is not within the temp table, and then we are going to return that username. So in this way, when we call the next user 10 times, we are going to get 10 different usernames. And once we have processed them, we can delete them from both the tables. So we also have to update the delete queue similar to the next queue. Alright, so this is updated. Now we are deleting the same user from both the tables. Alright, the next thing what we need to do is update the proxy get function. So the proxy get function is expecting the list of servers, the username and user data channel. So let's make two channels. So these are our two channels that we'll be using in order to pass on the data. Alright, so now we have passed on the two channels. Apart from these two channels, we also have to pass on the proxy servers list. So for that, we'll be doing this. Alright, so now we are calling the proxy get function column number of times. So each time we are passing on the variables of both the username and user data channels, and we are also passing on the list of proxy server that each instance of this function should be processing. And once we are done, let's write another loop where we'll be getting the data. So we'll be writing another infinite loop. So within this infinite loop, we are expecting the user data. So once we have our user data, we are going to save the user data using our save and delete queries. So with the save query, we are going to save the user data, and the next step is to delete the user data. So you delete user queue is going to accept the username. So we have pointed out to the username so that we can delete the users from the user queue and the temporary queue. And we don't need this for loop anymore. Alright, once we got the data, the next step is to pass on the data of a new username to the function. So let's do that. As you can see here, we are passing on the next username to the channel. Whichever the Go proxy get function is now free, that is going to pick up this username and it is going to process it. So let's also log so that we'll know which user we are currently running and which proxy server we are using. Let's add one more variable here, called as ID, so that we'll know which instance of a function is actually processing the data. Let's pass the variable I so that we'll know the instance of the function. Okay, there you have it. So let's run this and check if it is working. Okay, here we are getting an error that says that slice is out of bound. So this is not correct. And here we are not even getting a 0. So let's see what is the issue. Okay, so here we are directly using the length of the proxy server, which is not correct. Let's create a new variable, call it as a bracket, which is equals to length of the proxy servers divided by the proxy servers. Alright, we are going to create a bracket. So within this bracket, we have the length of the proxy servers divided by the number of connections that we have. That is going to represent the bracket. And now let's update this accordingly. So here we have proxy servers, I multiplied. So we are going to start by I times the bracket. And similarly, I plus 1 times the bracket minus 1. So this is going to fix our issue. Let's run this again and check this. There you have it. Now it is working. Alright, so here you can see that we have 10 functions getting called parallelly, and each of the function is using a different proxy server. But there seems to be an error over here. So let's see what the error is. It says that certificate has expired or is not valid. Okay, in order to handle this error, let's go back to our make request function. So within the make request function, let's say that if there is any error, let's just return a blank value. So in case there is any error, we are just going to return a blank value, and let's log the error as well. Or maybe not. That is going to have, we are going to have too many log reports, so let's not do that. And let's do the same over here as well. So this should fix our issue. Let's try this again. But before we try it, we need to ensure that we are clearing out our temporary table. Now let's try to run this again. There you have it. We have first 9, and as you can see, we are getting the data. Let's go to our user data. Here you can see that we currently have 8. Alright, let's make one small change. So currently we are unsure if we are actually getting the data or not. So for that, let's add a log over here so that we know that we are getting the data. Now let's try this again. Before we try it, we have to delete the table. So now here you can see that we are getting the data through one of the proxy servers. So let's wait for some more time and see if we are able to find better proxies throughout the list. Okay, I'm going to make one small change to the code. So if I go back to the make request function, so within the make request we are using these headers. So let me change the user agent. So let's use this user agent, and then let's completely remove the app ID. So now let's try it again. Oh, before we try, we always have to go to the temporary table and make sure that we clear this. Alright, so initially it took some time to find some good proxy servers, but once we found the proxy servers, within couple of seconds we are getting back-to-back new users. And all this user data is saved in user data table. And if you look at the user queue, we have almost 680 users, and within user data, we have almost 37 different users. So currently we are only storing this information, but if you want, you can add additional tables to store the followers count, following count, and all the other information that is publicly available. So for one last time, let me show you what is going on. So within this particular function, we are creating two channels, username and user data. We are using these channels to communicate to a function that is running concurrently. So we are having multiple functions that are running concurrently, and we are using these channels to communicate to them. And we are having a con number. This is representing the number of concurrent functions that we can run. In our case, we have defined it as 10. You can increase the number and use whichever the one that works for you. Now, next thing what we are doing is we are finding the bracket, which is the number of proxy servers each function should have. So to do that, we are taking the total number of proxy servers, dividing that by the concurrent number. And then we are calling the proxy get function n number of times. So initially we are getting the next user from the queue, and then we are calling the go proxy get function, and we are passing on the proxy servers that it should process. So for the first proxy get function, it is going to be server 0 to 100. For the second proxy get function, it is going to be proxies 100 to 199. I'm sorry, this is 99. And the next one, it is going to be 200 to 299, and so on. And any remaining proxy servers, those are handled here. So we have one more function called outside the loop. So if there are any remaining proxy servers within our list, we are calling it through this particular loop. So once we have called n number of proxy get functions, we are waiting for the data to be returned. So using the user data channel, we are receiving data from one of the proxy get functions. Once we have the data, we are saving the data to the database, and then we are deleting the data from the temporary table and the queue. And we are also logging on to the output. And we are getting the next user from the queue. We are passing the username through this channel. Now, whichever the function has completed and is waiting for the username is going to pick up this username and start processing it. You can find this code in the GitHub. Link is below in the description. Thank you so much for watching.